There it is. He timed it right.
Counting to explode with the left. Oh, and that right, but Davis took off some of the steam of the punch, but still.
Welcome to the motherfucking lady. We're covering today's top boxing news.
On the dotted line, and he did it before. You know, he would have been smart to have renegotiated that with a win. You know, there'd be a different weight stipulation, but it is what it is. I mean, anyone who has eyes can see that he was weight trained. He just didn't have the reactions. He looked frail out there. But I'm not going to take away from Ben's performance. He did what I didn't think that he could do, and that was fight a disciplined fight for 12 rounds, because that's what he needed to do. This was Chris Eubank's fight to lose. He went out there and he was able to outbox and outfight Ben the first time, but this time Ben came out with using feints, using that explosive first step, using the jab all night long, being somewhat elusive, being in and out, which for Eubank, who just couldn't really ever get going, couldn't get his jab going, couldn't get his offense going, couldn't get his feet underneath him. It was a great night for the Ben family. That's the first Ben to ever beat a Eubank, and he did it in dominating fashion, even scoring 2 knockdowns in the last round. But you're always going to look at this like, he's an older guy and making the weight. I think it's time for Ben to fight somebody under the age of 35. His biggest wins have all come against guys who are over 35 years of age. It's time for him to fight guys closer to his age.
I don't disagree with Chris. I would like to see Conor Ben now with someone who's younger, someone who's fresher.
I think that Chris, even though he shared the ring with Conor Ben, he was even-tempered in his assessment of the fight, mostly. But I am so sick of hearing about Chris Eubank Jr. being drained and things about the weight. The people at boxing scene now ask, why did Chris Eubank Jr. agree to drain himself again for Conor Ben? Was it pride, pressure, or just a bad call?
Can I remind you guys of something?
What?
Remember that it took a while to deliver the first fight, because when initially they tried to do it, Conor Ben tested positive for a banned substance. Reports at the time indicated that in spite of that, Chris Eubank Jr. still wanted to go ahead with the fight. That was over 2 years ago.
Still wanted to do it in spite of the peds.
It comes out that Conor Ben tested positive for a banned substance. The fight doesn't happen. 2 years pass as Conor tries to clear his name. And all in between there, Chris Eubank Jr. had other options that would not have subjected him to weight stipulations, catch weights, or rehydration clauses, none of it. Chris had other options. He had options before the first fight. He had options after the first fight. So that if he kept choosing to fight Conor Ben, let's not play him the violin.
For how long was unified middleweight champion Eubank Kanalai without a dance partner? He would have fought Chris Eubank Jr. if Chris wanted to fight him. As much as he wanted to fight Conor.
He could have did a domestic dust-up with Denzel Bentley in the middleweight division. He was offered millions to fight Hamza Shiraz at a more forgiving weight.
He wouldn't have had to drain himself to fight Hamza. He definitely wouldn't have had to drain himself to fight Canelo Alvarez at super middleweight. Or did you guys forget that he was offered that fight and he turned it down? You guys must have forgot that you're now playing him the violin. He's a big boy, and this is what he chose for himself. Time and time again, as other fights and other offers were on the table, he kept choosing Conor.
Boxing scene asks why. Was it pride? Pressure?
No, it was risks versus rewards. It was what it always is with these fighters.
It was risks versus rewards.
Chris Eubank Jr. had other options that would not have required him to drain himself, as some people say that he drained himself, but he kept choosing Conor because the rewards for a Conor Ben fight were greater than the rewards for a Eubank fight, or a Bentley fight, a Hamza Shiraz fight, in tandem with Conor being a smaller man who would be moving up in weight, having no prior experience at middleweight. It was a less risky fight than what else was on offer. The Chris Eubank Jr. that beat Conor Ben in the first fight would have got decapitated by Eubank Kanalai, decapitated by Hamza Shiraz.
You think Chris didn't know that? That's why he kept coming back to Conor.
You think that Chris drained himself and you're asking why? That's why. Because draining yourself for a Conor Ben fight not only pays better than those other fights, but it's a lot less risky. Risks versus rewards. It's not exactly a murder mystery why Chris subjected himself to this. It's very obvious.
So stop feeling sorry for him. He made a boatload of money having never actually won a full world title, having never actually been a full world champion, off his daddy's name and his rivalry with Nigel Benn. Chris Eubank Jr., in spite of not being a world-class fighter, in spite of never having been a world champion, was able to make a fuck ton of money. So stop throwing him a pity party. Stop feeling sorry for him. Stop questioning what his rationale is when it's very obvious.
Risks versus rewards.
In men's heavyweight news, Frank Warren's reaction to his charge, Fabio Wardley being elevated to full WBO champion. Frank said, Britain has a new heavyweight world champion and a new star of the sport. One of the most incredible stories I've seen in my 45 years as a promoter. And I could not be prouder of young Flavio. Some huge fights ahead for 2026 as he defends his WBO title and creates a true legacy in the sport. One of those big fights I don't anticipate to be an Usyk fight.
Well, isn't that obvious? Usyk dropped the belt.
You're not understanding me. I don't think it's Frank Warren's mission to see Fabio Wardley crowned an undisputed champion. This was the best possible outcome for the both of them, for Frank Warren and Fabio Wardley, not having to challenge Usyk for what he's got, but getting a piece of it anyway.
It's the best possible outcome.
These are not intended to be disparaging comments in reference to Fabio, who I'm a fan of, and been a fan of. Controversial stoppage and all, I'm still a fan of Fabio. I still enjoy his fights.
Still think he's one of the most exciting heavyweights in the heavyweight division today, and believe it or not, it's actually good that he has an alphabet title here at the end of Usyk's career, and I think that's where we're at. It's good that Usyk didn't derail him, like he just derailed Daniel Dubois earlier this year, and all the momentum that he amassed, Usyk put a stop to that. It's good that that didn't happen to Fabio. That is what would have happened.
I don't have a doubt in my mind, but I think it's better for the division right now if an unbeaten fighter becomes world champion and ushers in a new era of boxing with a world title in hand. Frank has plans for Fabio Wardley that I think don't include an Usyk fight, a fight for undisputed.
My previous video, we talked about this from the Alexander Usyk angle, vacating the brown belt. Here, let's talk about it from the Fabio Wardley angle.
Take away Alexander Usyk, eliminate him from this division, and it becomes a free-for-all, where anybody can beat anybody on the night. That's actually a good thing for Fabio and the rest of the heavyweights, that they may not have Usyk to deal with that much longer. In effect, it could extend Fabio Wardley's reign as a champion. Who would have thought that a white-collar fighter with no real amateur background would have made it this far to a world title? And given the depth of Frank Warren's heavyweight stable, he's no shortage of options for Fabio to defend his title.
He's got all kinds of guys over there that he can fight.
Some guys that he can beat. In the last set of WBO rankings for the heavyweight division, Joseph Parker, then interim champion, replaced by Fabio Wardley. Moses Itelma was ranked at number 1, but we know that Moses is going the WBA route, so that eliminates him. Philippe Hrgovic, ranked at number 2.
Chinese danger man, Zhilei Zhang, ranked at number 3. Lawrence Okoli, yet another Frank Warren fighter, ranked at number 4. Daniel Dubois, yet another Frank Warren fighter, ranked at number 5.
Start to see how the division may take shape and what fights Frank Warren might make moving forward, because he's got the bodies for Fabio. He's got the options. That he doesn't need an Alexander Usyk fight to put Fabio Wardley in an interesting matchup that would make interesting money in the United Kingdom. I say it all the time, that for a heavyweight, most of the money, the real money, is across the pond in the UK. There's no money in heavyweight boxing for an American.
I mean, yeah, there's no real money in American heavyweight boxing, and that's why there's so few of them.
Money's in Britain, who now has a new world champion. 2 by my count. Not too long ago, they were down to 1, dangerously close to none. Nick Ball still holds his WBA featherweight title now.
Now Fabio's got the WBO. That makes 2. Very soon could be 3. If Jazza Dickens is elevated from WBA interim champion to full champion.
Lamont Roach is the full champion, but we all know that Lamont Roach's next fight is 2 divisions north of 130 at 140. And it's not likely that he returns to super featherweight, so that when he doesn't and he drops his belt, it goes to Jazza, at which point Britain will have 3 world champions.
Possibly 4 by the end of next year.
Kubrat Pulev is supposed to defend his WBA regular title against Murat Gassiev. The winner of the fight is under orders to face Moses Itelma immediately after. If Moses has that fight, wins that fight, subsequently gets elevated to full champion. That will bring the head count to 4 British world champions. It could break down that way.
Moses is another Frank Warren fighter.
So you got Flavio holding a WBO right now, and down the line, Moses Italma could be holding the full WBA title. It's all coming up Frank Warren.
See his pieces being moved on the board, and what may shape the landscape within the next calendar year.
Fabio Wardley's limitations have been on full display his last 2 outings. He was getting thoroughly outboxed by both Justice Hooney and Joseph Parker until his power is punching power bailed him out.
Bit of elbow grease from Howard Foster.
He's got his limitations, and we're all aware of them, to where shooting for undisputed, if he has to fight Usyk to do it,
Not a good idea.
for this reason, I don't think Frank Warren is going to prioritize an undisputed showdown in the coming calendar year when he has so many other options for his newly crowned WBO champion that could extend his reign, allow Queensberry to do several shows around him. Not every fighter has the ability to shoot for undisputed, and that is an inconvenient truth. That is, not every fighter is an Usyk, a Crawford, an Inoue, or a Canelo.
Not every fighter has the luxury of ambition, for lack of a better word. It's nothing to sneeze at that Fabio, with little more than some white-collar experience, made it this far. I'm not disparaging him. I'm just saying that different fighters have to navigate their careers differently based on their ability or the lack thereof. Because not every fighter has the ability of an Inoue, of a Crawford, of a Canelo, of an Usyk. So, shooting for undisputed, it's not for those less able fighters what it is for them.
It's not for Fabio what it was for Usyk, is what I'm saying. And for Fabio to have a long and successful career, a long and successful reign, no, he can't go about things the way that Usyk did. The only way I see Fabio going on an undisputed run to collect the other alphabet titles is if he doesn't have to go through Usyk to do it. If when Usyk retires and the belts are redistributed, other contenders are elevated to full champion, maybe then.
Frank's got his pieces on the board and he's moving them. We talked about Moses Italma going the WBA route. His other heavyweight, Daniel Dubois, is going the IBF route, fighting in an IBF final eliminator against Cuba's Frankie Sanchez. It's conceivable that in the next calendar year, Frank and Queensberry may have 3 of the 4 major titles at the weight.
And once he does, then maybe you'll start to see more talk about undisputed and his boys fighting each other for undisputed. So you see what I mean, that this was the best possible outcome for Fabio Wardley, not having to face Usyk for a title but getting one anyway.
Best possible outcome for Frank.
Elsewhere in the heavyweight division, more details on the proposed fight between Anthony Joshua and Jake Paul. You may have heard that a weight limit has been set for Anthony Joshua. It's been confirmed that Anthony will not be allowed to weigh more than 245 pounds when he weighs in for his fight against Jake Paul next month. To put that into context, Joshua has weighed in at 250 plus in his last 5 fights, but did weigh under 245 in both of his fights against Alexander Usyk, so you know that he can make it if he has to. From his 32 fights as a professional, he has weighed in at 245 or less for 19 of those fights. They're trying to find a common ground.
Sort of even terrain for Anthony Joshua and Jake, where there really isn't one. I mean, even with that, does that improve Jake's chances in any way? I don't think so. For a man 6'6", well over 200 pounds, having to lose 7 in 5 weeks is tantamount to a trip to the bathroom.
Maybe a last-ditch effort to weaken Anthony, at least a little bit, over the 5-week period that Jake is going to be preparing for this fight. Not a full camp, definitely short notice. Jake Paul's not a guy where Anthony needs to go over strategy and tactics to deal with his boxing, so the next 5 weeks for Anthony will be a fat camp.
Well, he doesn't really get fat, more like a fit camp.
You cut out the carbs, the fight's not going down in the UK, so you're perfectly okay to use a sauna, sweat some of that weight out. Should be alright. I don't think this proposed catch weight, as ridiculous as it is for a heavyweight where normally there's no heavyweight limit, it's silly.
Stupid, but I don't think it makes the least bit of difference in a legitimate fight between Jake and Joshua. So if it's as lopsided as it's being made out to be,
That shit ain't gonna help.
why is Jake doing this? So many are in awe that he would have signed his own death warrant fighting Anthony Joshua in what is supposed to be a legitimate fight, that's what's in question. Is this a for real fight? Is this a legitimate fight? Boxing insider Rick Glacier reacted by saying, Jake Paul is now in a real fight for 8 rounds with Anthony Joshua on December 19th in Miami on Netflix. Stop with the conspiracy theories. Joshua is mega wealthy, and Joshua nor Eddie Hearn would ever involve themselves in anything that is illegal, like throwing a fight. And there will be wagering on this fight, so forget the crazy conspiracies. Assuming Joshua wins, he probably fights Tyson Fury next year in what will be his biggest windfall.
His biggest financial windfall ever. So AJ has a lot of reasons to give it his best effort and performance. I give Jake Paul credit, but he had to face a huge name or Netflix would not have given Paul the deal after the Tank Davis fiasco. Best regards to all involved, a similar sentiment that I expressed. For Netflix to stay at the table, Jake can't fight another Chavez fight or another Anderson Silva fight. To get that big Netflix bag, Jake needs a big name.
But because he's run out of MMA fighters to pick on,
there are any number of boxers that would have gladly accepted a Jake Paul fight, but how many of them have a big enough name that Netflix would have paid for it? So you understand why he might have taken on the Anthony Joshua fight. As risky as it is, it's because it's the only way to keep Netflix involved. They're not going to pay for just any old fight. It's got to be a big one. Those are the only fights they're interested in.
the big ones.
In some ways, that mentality in and of itself legitimizes Jake Paul as a prize fighter. So much of the sales pitch has been him wanting to be considered a bona fide pugilist, a true blue prize fighter. Well, he's doing what a prize fighter would do.
Prioritizing the prize, in this instance, over his own health. But how many other pugilists, prize fighters, don't make that same decision every time they get out there? Maybe he's thinking to himself, Anthony's coming off a loss and a stint of inactivity. If I crack him one good time, he might go down.
Maybe he thinks that Anthony is washed. Anthony is chinny, and he only really has to land one good one to shake him off.
A scenario that was presented to me by a regular here on the panel, friend of the channel, Leo Vega, who said maybe Jake drunk his own Kool-Aid and he truly believes he can win this fight. I wrestle with that scenario because if he were that confident, he wouldn't have been looking to fight a lightweight in Gervonta Davis right before this. The only reason we're here now is because that fight fell through. I don't actually think Jake is all that confident, so much as desperate. For you to keep Netflix involved, it's gotta be a big one. It's gotta be a big name.
You've exhausted all the big names that make for a safe fight. Now, you're in there with a big name that makes for a dangerous one. But you're out of options. You don't have much of a choice. It's this or what?
It's this or nothing.
Remember what kind of money Netflix is kicking out. So if you find yourself wondering, why would Jake Paul sign up for this?
The money. Same as any other prize fighter.
He's doing it for the money. Why the fuck else would he put himself in harm's way?